We've all been asked to do more with less in recent years. But unless we're careful to manage and mitigate against burnout, we're going to very quickly end up doing less and less and less. Hey leader, David Burke is here, organizational psychologist and author of 5 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever, including the new book, Best Team Ever, The Surprising Science of High-Performing Teams. And if you're watching this video and you're wondering how you can help your team move through burnout and collaborate better and get more done, you're probably gonna love that book too. Check it out, link in the video description. Look, demands at work have been piling on in recent years. We have not only new demands like new learning styles around hybrid or virtual collaboration, we have the always seems to be coming, never quite here threats of recessionary times and organizational right-sizing, downsizing, efficiency, whatever the heck you want to call it. And what that usually results in is asking people to do more with less resources, less people on their team, hopefully more tools. Maybe one day we'll be able to train the AI to do this all for me. Although if you've seen some of the terrible writing AI is being asked to produce on behalf of the business school students that I'm grading papers for, you know that that AI savior is actually a lot further off than we think. In the meantime, it's incumbent upon us as individuals for ourselves, but also as leaders of teams to manage that stress, manage that burnout, and manage that capacity on the team. But here's an interesting element of burnout. It's not always about just doing too much and being at capacity. That can be part of it, but it can also be about other experiences in that employee's time at work, in that individual's time on the team that are causing them to be burnt out. So in this video, we're gonna talk about 5 different triggers of burnout at work and how you as a leader or even an influential teammate can help mitigate some of those triggers and keep burnout at bay. So the first and obviously the most obvious one is what we would call a lack of margin, meaning workers are just constantly overloaded with their assignments. They are at capacity or exceeding capacity and too often don't see how they can manage that workload. And as a leader here, the way you can kind of mitigate that, you may not be able to remove anything from their table, but there's 2 things you can watch out for. Right? Number 1 is that in so many organizations, the reward for good work is more work. And that may be a bias you're falling prey to as a leader. Maybe that person who's experiencing burnout is the most productive person on your team, and the reason is that you keep giving her more and more assignments without realizing that there are some things you could probably take off of her plate and hand to someone else. The other is just a lack of equitable task assignments, we might call it. This usually results when a leader is divvying up tasks for individual members of the team without the team having a regular check-in, a regular huddle where they're talking about what they're all working on. Because what can often happen when the team works out loud is we start to realize where we can borrow margin from other people, where this person might be at capacity temporarily, so this person can kind of fill in. And as a result, we don't have 2 members that are totally exceeding capacity and 2 members who are actually bored. We can spread that around with maybe the tasks that aren't so critical for this person and get back margin for everybody on the team. The second trigger for burnout at work is a lack of control. We feel like we just don't control what's happening to us or how we're assigned. We feel left out of the decision-making process and therefore feel like we have no autonomy over our work. Maybe we feel like we totally lack the resources to do our job and we have no idea how to get those resources. And as we know, that sense of autonomy and that sense of feeling that you have what you need, that your skill set and the resources you have are adequate for matching that task, may be stretching you a little bit, but stretching you too much is harmful. As we know that autonomy and what's sometimes called mastery or progress, those can be powerful motivators as well. So it makes perfect sense then that the lack of that autonomy can be a demotivator or a burner out-er. I don't know if we just invented a term there or not. As a leader, you may not be able to give total control to your employees. I tend to believe that most teams and most team leaders can give a click more autonomy to people than they think they can, but I understand it. There are highly regulated industries, there are highly structured jobs, highly tweaked sequences of tasks, so you may not always be in control, but there are still things you can do to think about how you can give the individual and the team a little bit more autonomy. Maybe it's not in what we do, maybe it's in when we do it, maybe it's in where we do it, right? There's a number of different questions that people are asking themselves when they're asking whether or not they have any control over their job. And as a leader, think outside just the what we're going to do or the how we're going to do it. And think about some of those other questions, and you may be able to find some space to give them some autonomy and make them feel like they have a little bit more control. The third trigger of burnout at work is a lack of clarity. We quite simply don't know what's expected of us. We don't know how to do a great job. We don't know how our effort leads to the results that we're going to be judged on. And this can come right from the very beginning with, unfortunately, incredibly vague job descriptions where we say yes to a job that doesn't end up looking like the job that we thought we were going to have. But it tends to happen over time. Why? Because people who are hired for one role very rarely stay in that role for very long. Now, they might have the same job title, they might have the same boss for years and years and years. But as new projects come in, new tasks are added to that list, changes in the environment force changes in who does what, people start moving further and further and further away from the job description they were hired for. And that's okay, that can actually be a sign of growth. But when that's accompanied by a vagueness, by a performance evaluation or a feedback system that doesn't actually support or isn't based on the work people are doing now, that can lead to an incredible amount of stress. As a leader, the single best way to mitigate this is to make sure your people have clarity about what's expected of them. This comes usually from regular check-ins with them to make sure that you're clear on what they're going to do, that they're clear on what your definition of a successful project looks like, and that you're available to help them clarify anything moving forward and help coach them or provide them any resources they need to achieve that task. Clarity is a gift that leaders give the individual people on their team that helps them truly thrive because they know exactly how to exceed expectations. I mean, think about it. You cannot exceed expectations if you have no idea what the expectations are. And the fourth trigger of burnout at work is a lack of civility. Yeah, this is just straight up working for a toxic team or a toxic organization. And it's no surprise this is a trigger of burnout. This doesn't necessarily mean the whole organization is toxic. Often it's one person, one bully, one bad boss, etc., that is contributing to a negative experience of work for one person or one specific team. And that's why you can simultaneously see teams be given awards for best place to work in whatever city and also have a higher than average turnover rate in a specific department. I work with a lot of organizations where one of the things we do is not just look at turnover and engagement organization-wide, but go down levels at specific teams and then try to figure out what's going on there. And usually it's a lack of civility on the team. It's either somebody being overtly disrespectful like a bully, or it's people not being clear about what respect and civility and cohesion on a team are supposed to look like. And I get it. As a leader, you might be thinking like, yeah, but I'm judged on getting performance, right? This is all soft stuff. Well, the soft stuff gets pretty hard if half of your team or the top performers on your team are quitting consistently. You're not going to achieve whatever results you're trying to drive if you're not doing it civilly. And it may mean that you need to model the way here, and it may mean that you need to actually step up and step in when you watch it happen. But in either case, leaders teach and reinforce what respectful behavior looks like, and that helps mitigate and reduce those feelings of stress, that feeling of dread to just another meeting with those certain people, and can actually increase engagement because people know you have their back. Speaking of having their back, that leads us to the fifth and final trigger of burnout at work, which is a lack of social support. Individuals who just lack a strong support system, whether that's family, whether that's friends, or whether that's work friends, can very quickly slip into feelings of isolation and loneliness. And we saw this in a majority, a significant amount of the knowledge workers who could afford to work remotely during the pandemic, who then did. We saw them struggling with feelings of isolation and feelings of loneliness and sort of desperate to reconnect back into that sense of social support. And we shouldn't have been surprised when that happened. And as a leader, it's not exactly your job to be friends with everyone, but it's important to kind of pay attention. What signals are you getting, maybe about their life outside of work, or maybe about their ability to connect with their colleagues? And what can you do to create just opportunities for friendships, for social support, for people to click at work? We know from a myriad of research that friends at work are a significant driver of productivity, but also decrease stress, make people feel like they're truly engaged in the task and in the organization. And you can't force people to be friends, but you can try and create opportunities for people to click. Unstructured times, usually outside of work or at break times in the work, that let people have non-work conversations, discover things about each other, and maybe make some friends along the way. You can't force it, But if you don't create space for it, it's never gonna happen. And that's probably a good mantra for this entire episode and all of these 5 triggers, right? You may not be able to control everything about it, but if you're not taking an active step in each, you're probably leaving your team a little bit more vulnerable to burnout than you would prefer. You can't control everything on their plate, but you can pay attention to how much capacity they have and whether or not there's some margin there. You can't give them total autonomy in most cases to do whatever they do, but you can investigate those areas where you can grow. You can't provide total and never-ending clarity, but you can demonstrate that you're there to help people get clear when they're unclear. And you can't control whether or not somebody is going to be a bully. Maybe you can control getting them out of there, but you can't control everyone on your team is going to interact with. But you can demonstrate what civil behavior on your team looks like and act as a sort of a human shield for your team to experience a much more civil form of collaboration. And as we said, you can't control who people become friends with, but you can create those opportunities to have friends. And when you do, you're gonna create a team that people actually want to be on. You're gonna create a team that makes people much more engaged and much less stressed. You're gonna be on a team that has banished burnout, or at least committed to putting it as far away from the team's effort as possible in order to help everybody on the team do their best work ever. Oh, and one more thing. If you want to dive deeper on that last issue, the social support thing and how you can help your teams put those feelings of isolation and loneliness away, you're going to want to check out this video here on how teams bond so you know what kind of opportunities you can create for that team bonding.